Hello and welcome to the Uncapped Podcast, brought to you by Roast House Pub, one of Frederick's finest craft beer and culinary destinations, where great people come to drink amazing beer. Visit them to track their taps and menu at roasthousepub.com or download the digital Pour app to track what's on tap. Hello, this is episode 74, and I'm your host, Chris Sands. Right now we're in outside of Baltimore at the Guinness Open Gate Brewery and Barrel House with Brewmaster Peter Wiens. Thank you for spending some time with us, Peter.
Of course, yeah.
It was I've been looking forward to this for quite some time to be able to sit down and talk to you. So I guess first let's just how did you get into brewing?
Well, when I was in the mid 90s, when I was in college, my cousin was lab manager for Mad River Brewing Company up in Humboldt, and so he introduced me and several other members of my family to the beers that they were making, to craft beer, and kind of spurred our interest, and we got interested in the idea of opening up a brew pub. And so at that time I was at Cal Poly Pomona. I was studying landscape architecture. I had gone to Davis before that and studied biosci, a little bit of engineering, stuff like that. And I knew Davis had a brewing program, so what my thought was, well, if I want to open up a brewery, then let's learn how to make beer. So I started home brewing with some of the other members of my family, and changed my major, went back up to Davis, studied fermentation science, got my bachelor's degree. And after that, came out of school, short career in the wine industry. So I worked for Robert Mondavi down in Woodbridge as an operator. After I got my bachelor's, I was thinking that I would go back to school for brewery design, more like a master's of food engineering. And kind of to bridge the gap between when I got my bachelor's to when I was going to go back to school, I went to work for Mondavi. Decided that getting a paycheck was better than
Spending
more money on education. So I went to left Mondavi and went to work at Budweiser.
So what does a Master of Food Science entail?
Well, since I never actually did mine.
Okay.
Yeah, I do have some friends that did the Masters of Food Science up there. My plan was to work with Charlie Bamforth and do Masters of Food Science, or Food Engineering, actually, so focusing on brew house design and brewery design, which kind of turns out that I ended up doing a lot of that in my career without having to go through that schooling.
So they'll actually have classes teaching the proper way to design a brew house, or is it just it would be more other education that would be applicable to it?
Correct, yeah. More specialized. There's a lot of food engineering, chemical engineering, fluid flow, dynamics, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And then you'd have a senior project, or not a senior project, but a research project or a paper that you'd have to do.
All right, so then you went on to work for Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah, I started in the pilot brewery in St. Louis. I was there for about a year. 10-barrel system that we had there. It was a lot of fun.
It's funny to think of Anheuser-Busch as has a 10-barrel system.
Yeah,
it makes complete sense, but it's just weird to, like, at the scale that they brew, to think that somewhere they have a 10-barrel system that they're using.
Yeah, there's a lot of innovations that come out of there, but also a lot of raw material evaluations. So we did a lot of different things. We made a lot of new brands. We made, with all the different hops that Budweiser uses, we had to do single hop buds and stuff like that. And we had a lot of fun as well. We didn't make a lot of beer. We didn't sell any of the beer. But we still had the opportunity to try out some new things and learn how to brew the Budweiser way, the Anheuser-Busch way.
So you said evaluate new products. So when they would get in, like, maybe a new supplier, is that how they would test out the...
Well, each crop year, you have to evaluate the hops. We'd also do malt trials, malt crop year trials, new malt varieties or new barley varieties, stuff like that. And then new products. We did a few new products.
That's cool. Yeah, that's one thing people always say, like, if there's one thing about Anheuser-Busch, it's that the quality, the consistency, and the knowledge with brewing surpasses everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. I think it... I wouldn't say that it surpasses anywhere, but it is very, very difficult to make a beer across 12 sites in the U.S. that tastes consistent every time you drink it. From year to year, batch to batch, brewery to brewery. And so to get that consistency, we had to do a lot because crop years are different, growing conditions are different, the yeast is different, we had to do a lot of research, and we had to do a lot of trials to make sure that we could tweak parts of the process to make sure the beer tasted the same, even with slightly different changes in raw materials.
So did you spend your whole 10 years there, or did you hold other jobs with them?
Yeah, so I was there for a year in St. Louis. Then I moved to Los Angeles. So I was a supervisor in the fermenting department. And then in the brew house in Los Angeles. Then from there, I was promoted up to Fairfield, where I was in maintenance. And that was a great experience in Fairfield because that's when we put in a new brew house. So we put in 2 new kettles and a new ladder tun. Got to start that one up, and then back to Los Angeles, where I was in finishing cellar, so the filtration cellar. Ran that cellar for about a year and a half. Started working on another project there, which was a modernization. Big finishing cellar modernization. Started working on that before I became the assistant brewmaster of the brew house and fermenting. And there I got to work on more projects. I did that for 5 years, I believe. From there, I kind of did a stretch out of brewing. So I took over as business manager. And so what that was I had logistics, warehouse, and accounting, and the storeroom. And so it was an opportunity for me to kind of learn the other side, the shipping side. And I got to be a little bit more involved in packaging, and especially with logistics and how much money there is in logistics and how much savings there could be in logistics and that sort of thing, just optimizing that process. And also with budgeting and all the initiatives that we had as cost savings and stuff like that for accounting. That was a lot of interesting things we did. I did that for a year, and then I went into quality. So I was QA manager for a year. So I had the quality department for the whole site.
So it sounds like your time spent at Anheuser-Busch was basically an entire education on every aspect of how to work, almost do everything within inside of a large brewing operation.
It was pretty close. Yeah, I did everything but run a can line. So and I didn't run a big bottle line. We had 4 big fillers in Los Angeles, but I wasn't actually running the line. Other than the small, I think it was a 12-head filler we had in the pilot brewery. We got to run that one. I had some experience with cans from the quality standpoint and from the logistics, but not actually running a can line.
The brewery that you worked at with opening, how large of a brew house was that?
Which one?
The one that you worked at with
in Fairfield?
Yeah, Fairfield, sorry.
I have to think back to how big that. I believe it was in the 600 barrel range for batch size. So the one we had in Los Angeles, we had 2 brew houses. One was about 600 barrels, the other one was about 890, I think. So pretty good size.
So while the one here is humongous, it's kind of tiny compared to those ones.
Compared to what we had there, for sure. The 100 hectoliters or 85 barrels is not.
Yeah, they're just little babies.
Scale. Yeah.
So once you left Anheuser-Busch, what'd you do then?
So my brothers own a winery, and we started the winery in 2001. After I came back from St. Louis, we opened that up, and it was around the same time that I started my home brewing experience with some of the other members of my family. My brother Doug, he bought a plot of land to plant vineyards on. So I also while I was in college, I got to help him plant vineyards, and we made some of the first batches of wine in his garage. And so they had their winery that they moved to Temecula, and I think it was 2005 or 2006, and they wanted to get into brewing. So I went down there to work with them and my nephews and start a brewery. So I started up Wiens Brewing with my family in Temecula. I did that for about a year and a half. So I got them up and running and looked to the next challenge and went to Stone. So at Wiens, I got to do everything, working with them. I didn't spend quite as much time in the tap room management end of it, but I did dabble in that a bit. I did some deliveries. I did some line cleaning, draft line setups, brewing, packaging, construction almost. It was a lot of fun, a lot of work, but a lot of fun.
And I was telling you right before we started, it's crazy when I was looking up just to get a little bit of background of you. I discovered when I was in Temecula in 2013, I'd actually visited that brewery, which that was kind of weird of all places that I would have gone to. Although, I imagine it's probably even more packed, but when I was there, I think within like a 5 mile 5 mile radius, there's like 10 breweries in Temecula that we went to.
Yeah, I haven't been back down there in a while, but I know, Refuge was open right across the street from us. Iron Fire was down the street. We had Aftershock. Since then, Electric Brewing has opened up, and some of these other guys, I think Iron Fire and Craft from Lake Elsinore, they're opening up taste rooms in Old Town Temecula, which is kind of the neat thing about California is you can have one license and you can open up satellite tasting rooms, which is something you can't do at all here in Maryland.
Yeah, and Pennsylvania, they allow that too. You can have, I think, up to 5 locations on the same license.
Yeah, I think it's similar in California, I believe.
Yeah, I liked Iron Fire had a jalapeno ale that I loved because it had really strong jalapeno flavor, but almost none of the heat.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not big on the really hot beers.
Yeah, they also made one that if you were a fan of really hot beers, you would have loved it. They had I think it was a ghost pepper they put in one beer. It was hot.
Yeah,
really hot.
I can only make it through like a half a bottle of habanero sculpin.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Not into the carbonated heat.
Yeah, I love spicy peppers. I love spicy food.
Yeah, so do I. But it's just something when
beers.
You add carbonation into there, my stomach does not enjoy that.
Yeah, the scene down in Temecula is really growing. They kind of spilled over a little bit from San Diego County. There's a lot more breweries. I think there's a lot more breweries now than there even were, 2 months ago or 3 months ago, I bet. But a lot of good beer coming out of there as well,
So when you first started at Stone, what were you doing there?
I started off as, what was my title? Project management. Basically, I was working on process improvement stuff, primarily on the cold side, on the filter side. Did that for a couple months before I started working on the design of the Richmond plant with some of my other colleagues that were there. And so going through the whole design process of, we had to select a vendor for the brew house. We had to select the vendor for the cellars first, and then getting into, they asked me before we had a location, they asked me if I would be willing to move east to to run the brewery, basically help build it and run it. And so I, of course, said yes, because to have an opportunity like that was amazing. It was huge. I don't even think I let Mitch get the sentence out of his mouth before I said yes. But it was a great experience to work. First to work with Mitch, I jumped at that opportunity. I got to know him a little bit while I was at Budweiser, actually, through the Master Brewers. And then he lived just around the corner from me. And so he used to come into Wiens, and we chatted up over there. And then was lucky enough that, he found a spot for me at Stone and came up with the idea for me to move to the East Coast. So we built that brewery in Richmond. It was on basically just a field, so we built the building, and there wasn't a huge team of us that built it. And so I did a lot of the coordinating, with a lot of the rest of the team. We kind of split up all our duties. There's really 5 of us from the Stone side that built it. So we couldn't have a lot of checks and balances. We just had to do it.
Yeah, that seems like for how large that project was, that seems like a really small team to...
Yeah, it was, but it was really good. We all worked really well together. So it was, Tommy's still there. Tom Molina, he's still there. And Bill McAvoy, he's moved on to Carl Strauss. Randy's still at Stone. He's the construction manager. He's based at Escondido. He's doing Napa and some of the other bistro projects. And then CJ, he went with Mitch down to New Realm. So CJ built the New Realm brewery for Mitch, and the next one, when Mitch builds another one, CJ will build that one too. But it was a ton of fun. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of fun. Learned a lot of things. I learned more than I ever wanted to know about underground piping and drainage. And then it was a lot of fun to start that place up and work through all the flavor matching and all that stuff that we had to do with IPA, with Delicious, Arrogant Bastard, and Brew Nation. Also got to build the team there, which I think is probably what I'm most proud of. It was a great team of people that worked there. Had my hands in hiring all of them, which was good. And it took a long time to build the team out like that, but it was, the most important thing we could do is make sure that we had a team of people that worked really well together. And it was kind of mixed emotions that I left, for sure, because I built this beautiful brewery Stone's a great company, a lot of great beer, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to come up here and do it again for Guinness.
Before we move on to that though, is it a lot harder to match the type of beers that Stone is making as opposed to Anheuser-Busch? So you said like no matter where you get the beer from with Anheuser-Busch, it tastes the same.
Mm-hmm.
Has Stone reached that point where, or are they brewing different beers at each location?
I think there's some that are slightly different in Berlin, but the recipes are the same in Richmond as they are in Escondido, and the goal is to have those beers taste the same. So that was a challenge because different brewing system, different brew house, different kettles. So that was one. Different water supply, in terms of the calcium to chloride and magnesium to sulfate ratios. And then different fermenter geometries, different fermenter sizes, and different dry hops and dry hop tank and recirculation kind of geometries that really impacted the flavor. And so the biggest hurdle that we had was the dry hop aroma. And so what was interesting was we have in Escondido this recirculation that we would do on the dry hop. So we built that into the Richmond facility with a few modifications. And we found out that we were actually recirculating too well, for one thing. We have actually flashing off some of the hop aromas during the recirculation. And then we tweaked our filter a little bit to kind of coarsen it up because it was too tight. So it was filtering the beer too cleanly. So it was stripping out some of those hop aromas. And then we also saw a big impact on the hop aroma with the yeast and the yeast viability, the yeast health. So that's something that a lot of breweries struggle with, is how to keep your yeast healthy and how to keep your yeast happy. And something that still there's a lot of research going on. There's a lot of people looking at how does that yeast interact with the hop aromas or with the hop compounds, and how does it kind of free up some of those hop aromas. So where we get a pretty good intensity sometimes on our hop aroma, we wouldn't get quite the same fruity character. For Delicious, it was a little more herbal, a little less lemony. And so just trying to match that one and enjoy by. So last I heard was that the team in Richmond has done well, and they're actually right on par with Escondido, and everybody's happy with the aroma that they're getting out of the beer, which is good.
So does that make those types of beer, are they harder to match to keep consistent, or is it just no matter what, it's hard to keep that level of consistency?
It's no matter what. The only one that we really didn't struggle with was Arrogant Bastard, which is the one that we thought we would struggle with a lot because of the dark malts. I think it's tricky no matter what the beer is, but if it's a lighter flavored beer, then you have less to hide. You don't have the dry hops to hide the flaws, but at the same time, the dry hop, if you're really picky about your dry hop and your dry hop aroma, then it is tough.
So that they didn't hold it against you that you spent 10 years brewing yellow fizzy beer? No, for sure not. It's funny like that they often have that refrain, but I imagine like where they're at now and what you were able to do for them, having that, there's no way you would have been like, they would need someone with the experience and what you learned working for Anheuser-Busch to be able to.
Yeah, I think that was definitely helpful. And it wasn't just me. There was Mitch who had a longer career at Bud than I did. Joel Grosser, who's there in Escondido, he's now the vice president of brewing. He and I actually started together in the pilot brewery in St. Louis. I started in May, and I think he started in August or September or something like that. So he had 12 years or more. I think he actually had 13 or 14 years at Bud. And then we also hired, like I said, Thomas Molina down in Richmond. He and I worked together. He started in Los Angeles. I trained him in the brew house. So there's a history. And now they also have Tom Tweedy, who was at Bud in quality, that I worked with him. So there's basically a history of Anheuser-Busch folks that took their experience and came down to Stone to help them reach the next level, the next plateau. And I think that's a lot. It's like that along at a lot of other breweries too.
So then that brings us to where we currently are, where, and from what I understand, you've actually dreamt of working for Guinness for a long time? Or
I did, yeah. So I celebrated my 21st birthday with a couple pints of Guinness. I also, and with my Ben Wiens, he's running Wiens Brewing out there. So he and I went out and had Guinness on my 21st birthday. When I was in college studying brewing, I told my wife that she wasn't my wife at the time, but I told her that one of my dreams was to go work for Guinness. And so when this opportunity, I heard about this it actually came from Charlie Bamforth. So I called up Charlie and asked him, because I knew that he had experience working with Guinness and Diageo. I asked him some questions and, tell me about the culture, tell me about the company. He didn't have anything to say that was negative. He had a lot of positive things to say, and more I met people, the more I chatted with people about who worked here, the more excited I got, especially with the opportunity to be in the innovation side that we have here, the 10-barrel system, starting up the 2-barrel system, and then the 100-hex system. I think it's an amazing opportunity. It's going to be a lot of fun. It already is a lot of fun, but it's even going to be even more fun when we get our 10-barrel system up.
Well, yeah, because right now it's still, while it's open, there's only a test tap room, but it's really still in its infancy of what this location's going to become.
Exactly, yeah. And we started the 2-barrel very unsophisticated. If you want to put it that way, we don't have a lot of there's no automation on it, basically. It's a very manual brewery, and it's we don't have a lot of lab equipment set up yet. We have a rudimentary lab, but as we get the 10-barrel up, as we get more lab capabilities, we get more yeast capabilities, we get more propagation capabilities, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's probably kind of weird brewing now, like looking forward to where I would assume a Guinness brewery in a facility like this is going to have a state-of-the-art quality control lab. So now it's like you're almost working as a small startup brewery.
Yeah, exactly. It was good for, to draw on the experience that Holly and I had, for me at Wiens and Holly at Stone and then at Highland, of working on these smaller systems already, drawing on that experience and being creative and problem solving, and how can we get things done, and how can we measure it without having a lot of those resources in place. And I think we've been pretty successful. I've been very happy with all the beers that we've had. I think the feedback's been good. In general, people are happy with the beers that we're putting out. And it's good to have. We have a couple more brewers on staff. We have 3 more that we have on staff now that get to brew on the 2-barrel system. So Holly and I can focus on starting up the 10 and starting up the 100-hex and get all those systems in place that we need to have there to ensure that we have the highest quality product coming out.
It's the 10-barrel system that you originally worked on for Budweiser. Mm-hmm. Was that all manual, or did that have automation?
It was a mix. It was similar to what we're going to have here. The brew house was, and I actually didn't brew on it in the brew house. I was in the filtration cellar and the aging cellar and the fermenting cellar the whole time I was there. The brew house was fairly well automated, with a Siemens control system. The starting cellar had some automation in terms of the air injection, the aeration skid. I think it was by Esau and Huber. And then it was hoses everywhere else with some automation on the temperature control, for the fermenters and the chip tanks.
At Wiens, what was the brew house there like?
It's a press barrel, which is similar to our 2-barrel here. So our 2-barrel here is also press barrel. So very manual. It does have a little control screen just for temperatures and stuff like that in the brew house, but it's all manual valves. There's no automated valves except for the steam valves.
So how big of a difference was that going from work? Because if I remember, it's a 20-barrel system. 15 barrel.
Yeah.
Going from working on your, would you say 600 barrel systems and all the way down to working on a 15-barrel system.
Yeah, it was completely different. If you just think about what you're used to in terms of yeast handling at a big production brewery is totally different than yeast handling at a small brewery. And that's probably the biggest challenge, that and trying to figure out how to manage the microbiology in terms of ensuring that you don't have any micro contamination. Consistency, you know, if you're making beer on one of these big production breweries, even like what we're going to have here, the work coming out is very consistent. So it's not only consistent in terms of the OG, but also the RDF, the degree of fermentability. And so your product is consistent. Just, you have a leg up, basically. So on the other hand, it is a lot less flexible on those big systems. So if you want to do something a little out of the box, like for what the Budweiser or one of these big production breweries would do, it's hard to do things like dry hop or whirlpool hopping or hopbacks or something like that, you know, or God forbid, kettle souring, you know. How would you do that unless you design it into the system?
Oh, so it's more of just like an assembly line type of arrangement, I guess?
Well, it's automated, so it's hard piped and automated, and you don't have the flexibility of hosing things over or have additional valves.
Okay.
So I wouldn't, you know, probably not as much of an assembly line as just making sure that you're consistent.
Okay. So then what was the size of the system at Stone?
In Richmond, we put in a 300 hectoliter, 250 barrel.
Okay.
So it's pretty good size.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's funny, like if you graph it out, you're like huge, tiny, big.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was a fairly sophisticated system we put in there too. It was, the brew house had a high level of automation, and then the cellar was fairly well automated with a few manual connections. We tried to minimize the number of hoses and stuff that we would have, just to try to make sure that we were efficient and consistent.
So now here on the 2-barrel system, do you feel like you're back in your homebrew days?
Not
comparatively,
almost, but not quite. It's more like being back at the pilot system that we had. We had a 1-barrel pilot system at Wiens.
Okay.
Which was this is kind of between that and the 15-barrel that we had there.
So you said there will be 3 different brew houses here.
Mm-hmm.
The 10, is that 10 barrel or 10 hectoliter?
10 barrel.
Okay, 10 barrel, and then the 100 hectoliter.
Correct.
So the 2-barrel system, if I understand correctly, that's the one you get to play on that one. For the most part, you guys, for experimentation and just trying out.
That's what we're doing now, is we're kind of playing around with it, and it's remains to be seen whether or not we're going to keep it here or we're going to move it back to Chicago.
Okay.
It kind of, you know, we can play on the 10-barrel system just as easy as we could on the 2.
Okay.
And then still have, you know, still be able to put out a little more beer. We don't get a lot of beer out of it. It's the same amount of work to do 2 barrels that it is 10. Although it is nice to, you know, only invest a little bit of time or into 2 barrels instead of investing that same amount of time into 10 if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's in Chicago?
That's where our Plainfield is, where we have our Diageo has a production facility there.
Okay.
And so we have a lab back there, a commercialization lab that has a brewery. And it's someplace where we can do research. We have a big research facility there where we can do a lot of fun things, and it might make more sense to have it back there, where we can play on some stuff back there. We have some brewers that work back there as well.
Okay. And then the 10-barrel system, so I guess that'll also be used for experimentation, and then that's what will feed the tap room here?
Correct, yeah. So we'll have some of the stuff that we're going to make on the 100 hec that will go into the tap room. You know, blonde is one for sure. But we talked about whether or not we want to have a couple more beers, maybe 3 more that we make on the 100 hec to supply the tap room, but also, you know, if we can get it into local market, that'd be awesome. But primarily the tap room will be supplied by the 10-barrel.
So it'll be mainly Guinness Blonde. What are the other large brands that'll be brewed here?
That's what we're working on.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have any concrete plans yet, but, you know, at least nothing we can share.
Gotcha. But I think I've read definitively, though, that stout or anything, that none of those will be brewed here.
We won't make the Guinness draft, no, or Antwerpen or West Indies porter or something like that, but that's not to say that we wouldn't make a stout.
Okay.
It just wouldn't be the same stouts that we make in Dublin.
Gotcha. And so speaking of Dublin, you've gotten to work quite a bit with the team over there, right?
Yeah. I took one trip last summer for a couple weeks, and then Holly and I went over in December. We were over there for a week. We got to brew a milk stout with them over there. It was fun.
Oh, cool. In their Open Gates facility?
In the Open Gate over there. And then they came over here last week, actually. So we're doing a collaboration with them, if you can call it a collaboration when it's internal.
Yeah.
We're doing a seaside stout, I think is what we're going to call it. So it has some crab seasoning, some seasoning inspired by some of the crab seasoning. So they came over last week and a little bit of sea salt as well. They came over last week and brewed that with us. So we're going to release that for St. Paddy's Day. And they're brewing one over there, which is also a seaside stout where they have some Irish ingredients and a little bit of sea salt.
Cool. Yeah, when I was there in, I think it was 2009. So because the Open Gate area is open to the public now, right? Yeah, when I was there, that wasn't public facing because it was in use that long ago, right?
Yeah, we've had that facility as a pilot system, similar to what we had at Bud for, as long as I know, at least 50 years in its current state. I think it's something like 50 years. I could be way off on the date, but Guinness has always had a innovation brewery.
Yeah, I think it just, when I was there, it wasn't open to the public yet.
Yeah, they added the tap room portion since then. I'm not sure exactly the date that they added the tap room portion, but it is open. I think it's Thursday through Sunday, if I'm not mistaken.
How large is the brew house there? That's going to be enormous, right?
Oh, the pilot system. Pilot system is 10 hectoliters, and the main brew house 4. I'm not sure exactly how big it is, but it's somewhere 600 hectoliter range, something like that. Yeah,
because I saw the pictures posted on social media from when you guys were visiting, and it just looked humongous.
Yeah.
Because that's the tour of St. James Gate's amazing, but you don't get to actually see the actual brew house or anything. It's more like a museum walkthrough, or actually more of like a playground because it's so amazing.
It's on the other side of the street, and so the storehouse is closer to where the roast house is, and then if you go closer to the river is where Brewhouse 4 is.
So far, what has been the most surprising or most interesting thing you've learned starting working for Guinness?
Most interesting thing working for Guinness, I think it's probably the yeast. Just trying to figure out, we have this old yeast strain, and it's quirky, and it's probably not unlike, in its unique characteristic, it's not unlike some of the strains that other breweries have that have historic yeast, like Budweiser has their historic yeast, but this one's even older. It goes back 259 years. And what we do is we have our stout yeast, and we have Guinness blonde yeast, which is related to stout yeast, but it's a little different. And then just trying to figure out exactly what we can do in terms of managing the yeast and managing the brewing process to get different flavors out of it, which is a lot of fun. And then also just other yeast that we have in our system, and being able to play with those, some of the Smitic stuff and harp has been a lot of fun.
So is the Guinness yeast used on all Guinness products, or?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the stuff that we do in the Open Gate, there's going to be some other yeast that we use. We do use some commercial yeast, because at the moment we don't have a Belgian strain, so we use commercial yeast for our Belgian beers that we make. We do have a yeast bank both here from our Seagram days, and we have a yeast bank in Dublin. As you operate a brewery for 259 years, you start to isolate different yeasts from different parts of the brewery, especially with our heritage of barrel aging and the yeast that would come in on barrels and different microflora that would come in on the barrels. We could isolate those, so we have those, and that's something that we get to play with. Haven't yet, but it's in the works.
How closely do you work with the team in Dublin? Is there a lot of working with them, or are you pretty autonomous here?
We consider the Open Gate team, we consider ourselves to be one team. So we try to communicate as much as we can, and we're escalating that a little bit, increasing our communication to at least weekly, so that we can have a plan. And if we want to work on some kind of an innovation thing, either for this market or for their market, we want to make sure that we're not both working on exactly the same kind of thing. But we can also learn a lot from them, and they can learn a lot from us, because they do have some resources, and their market is different. The UK market and the Irish market is totally different than the US beer market. And so we can learn about theirs, and they can learn about us. We can learn about the history of Guinness, the heritage of Guinness. We can learn a lot about the Guinness yeast, like I talked about. And then they can also learn a little bit about the US market and how different it is in terms of the hop forward beers and all those sort of things that we're playing with over here.
Has that reached Ireland at all?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. And it's probably pretty recent to go into other parts of the world, but when I got to go to a craft brewers event that led up to the Brew, so that would have been 2015, I think. Anyway, I got to meet some craft brewers from Russia, some from Latvia, all over Europe.
That's
basically.
Probably one of the last places I would think of craft brewers existing.
Yeah, so it was kind of a neat story because I was down in Nuremberg for the Brew, and walking around. I got there ahead of time because I flew out to go to Berlin for the first some of the first batches we brewed on the pilot system in Stone Brewing, and took the train down to Nuremberg ahead of Mitch. He got there. He spoke at the conference, is why we got to go. And I was in a little brewery in the old part of Nuremberg, and sat down next to a guy and started talking to him. And he was a craft brewer from Moscow, and then which was pretty cool. And then Ashton Lewis came in and sat down next to me, and then so I was like, I got to talk to him. And at the time he was with Mueller Company, and it was good to catch up with him for sure.
So is there anything planned or coming up soon that you can talk about that people should be excited for?
We have a lot of stuff coming up, other than opening hopefully this summer. I don't know exactly the date we're going to open, but it should be sometime in July, August for our full consumer experience in the tap room. So that's exciting. In terms of beers that we're going to put out, we have some beer brewed in Ireland that's sitting in bourbon barrels, and then we have some other barrels that we have some other brands that we've brewed here that we put into whiskey barrels or bourbon barrels. So we have some of that stuff coming. We have we're going to get some more of the Antwerpen that was aged in Dublin in bourbon barrels. We're going to get some more of that on tap within the next 3 weeks.
That's a really good stout.
Yeah.
When I got to try that, I really liked Antwerpen. That was a good one.
Did you have the barrel aged?
No, unfortunately, only just the regular. I think it was just from a bottle. I don't even think I've had it on draft.
Ooh. We have it on draft now in our tap room, which is cool. Exciting. And pretty sure we still have Foreign Extra Stout on tap as well.
I did have some of that on tap. So that was really good.
And then after St. Pat's, at some point, we'll have the barrel aged stout, the Antwerpen. Will be on tap again. We have a few other things that we're working on. We have in the tank right now a Belgian stout, so it's a stout brewed with some Abbey yeast. We have Crosslands this weekend. We released that yesterday, so that was it's our series of what I want to do is on the full experience, I want to have one tap panel that always features local ingredients, and so we're calling that the Crosslands, which is kind of a nod to the flag of Maryland. This one it's a pale ale with Black Locust Cascade hops and Dark Cloud Base Two-Row and Munich. And we put that on tap yesterday, so we're going to have a little release event for that today. It's a pretty tasty little pale ale. What else have we got in the works? That's about it that I can think of at the moment.
So along the lines of Crosslands, how important is it to you to embrace the being part of Maryland? Because it seems like this brewery definitely does.
Yeah, it's something that I really saw that we did in Richmond, and I think it's really important. And both from if you just think about where your food comes from, or where your ingredients come from, where your raw materials come from, as much as we can help that to get that more local, the better. But then not only that, but just to be a part of the community, part of the beer community and part of the community in general. We do a fair amount of that here, in terms of charitable organizations and being involved with donations to those, and even volunteering and stuff like that. So I think it's huge. It's a really big part of it. Try to not only hire local people, which we have hired mostly local people, but we also want to be part of that. Part of that community, part of the beer community, and part of the the agricultural community.
In fact, recently, someone from the East Coast capital of craft beer, Frederick, Maryland, started working for you.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, we hired on Todd, which he's a local guy, so we hired him as a brewer, which we're really happy with him. He brings a lot to the table, a lot of good experience from his time out there, and also time down at Dogfish. Also a UC Davis guy. He got his brewing education there, so that's important to me.
And you guys have you've already done some collaborations with local breweries in the area, correct?
Yeah, we've done one with the local brewery. So we did Heavy Seas. So that was we call it a home and away. So we did a beer here, they did a beer there. So that was our first one that we did with the local. So we're starting to line up who's going to be next. We're a little busy at the moment, so we're probably going to take a break until we get the 10 barrel up, and then we'll look to do something with somebody else local. We did one also with because CBC is going to be in Nashville, so we did one with the Nashville Brewery.
Okay.
So if you go to CBC, look for that one, Tennessee Brew Works. We did a beer with them. That'll be a lot of fun. Aged that in whiskey barrels, so it'll be delicious.
Cool. Other than what you're brewing here, what's your favorite or one of your favorite Maryland beers?
I knew you were going to ask that question. And I can't just pick one, right? But
that's why it's one of. You obviously love all of them. But
yeah, I've been very impressed with all the beers in Maryland. I'll tell you the last Maryland beer I had, which is I went over to Heavy Seas last night. I had the Gold, and it was really good. Their beers are always great. I love their beers. But like I said, all the ones that I've had here have been really good.
Okay. What was your favorite beer when you worked at Stone, that Stone makes?
Favorite Stone beer? It kind of changed, to be honest with you. It was, when I first started, I would have said Enjoy By. That was, it still is an amazing beer. Stone IPA is an amazing beer. Ruination also. But then, Delicious, when we came out with that one, that was my favorite for a little while. So that kind of rotated. I tend to do that.
I love Ruin 10.
Ruin
so
10.
Good.
Yeah, Ruin 10, that definitely was my wife's favorite.
And Lucky Bastard. That was really good too.
Yeah, that one.
And that was like a blend of Arrogant and was it Arrogant and Double blended together? Or it was some sort of,
I believe, Arrogant, Oak Aged, and
that's
Double.
what it was.
Yeah,
that was a really good beer.
Yeah, that's because you didn't have to make it.
Oh, was it difficult?
The blending process is always can be tricky. Yeah.
What aspects of it just to get a good?
Yeah, scheduling, coordinating.
Okay. The logistical nightmare.
Actually doing it, yeah.
So here will you be canning, bottling, or both, one or the other?
Yep. Yeah, so we have a can line, we have a bottle line, we have a second bottle line. So we have the ability to do some small scale stuff if we want to. I don't know if we'll be able to do cork and cage, but something on that scale, 500, 750s. And then also we have our the full range of products that we can put out in a can line and a bottle line for primarily for Guinness Blonde.
When will you have your first New England IPA can release?
That one will be tricky because we don't have a big can line. We don't have a small can line. So can of New England IPA. Yeah, we'd have to bring in a mobile canner or something to do that, which is not out of the question.
Yeah. So what is so far, what's the best thing about working for Guinness for you?
It's the being able to participate in the innovation that we're doing. When I started, I thought I was going to be building another brewery, but it's really been the innovation piece. which is something that I haven't had since I was at Wiens. And getting to work with Holly has been a blast. She's super smart and super talented. And we worked together at Stone. And I was really bummed when she left Stone to go to Highland because she was going to go to Richmond and we were going to work together out there. So being reunited with her has been amazing. She's, like I said, she's super talented, super smart, really, really good at innovations and new beers and new ideas, fresh ideas. So that's probably my most favorite thing is just working with her. And then now that we have Jonathan, we have Todd, we have Sean. The new brewers that we've hired, working with them has been a lot of fun.
How large of a team do you plan on having?
We'll have at least 3 more. So it's pretty small in the grand scheme of things in terms of the brewing world, but 8 to 10 people to start with.
Okay. What's your favorite style of beer?
At the moment, I'm kind of going back on my on a lager kick right now. And if you would ask me 2 months ago, I probably would have said IPA. IPA was my favorite style for a long time. I still have IPAs in my fridge, but...
I would guess working at Stone, you kind of have to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but, I made, in my career, if you put all the beer I've ever made in a giant bucket, it would be mostly lagers with, just a couple drops of IPA. Oh. If you think about it that way. So I do like lagers.
Yeah, it's funny how... and I can't remember who else we had talked about where brewing has kind of gone full circle back to like so many places have started to make the classic styles of beers. Like you see more and more places coming out with a new Pilsner or a new Kolsch or new lagers. It's a weird renaissance kind of compared to the other current trends.
Sure. Yeah. to think about just beer in general. So if you took one of these breweries over in Germany that's family owned, traditional, been making beer for 300 years, a small system, 80 to 100 hectoliters, picked them up and put them in Baltimore, they'd be a craft brewer, right? But they're just a traditional German brewer over there. And they're kind of going out to where they're realizing is they're making more IPAs, they're making more of the beers that we're kind of making. And we started off over here in the craft beer world of making beers that were more traditional English and German beers, and now we're kind of going back to making some more of those again. So it's a neat cycle. It's fun as a brewer, as a consumer. It's a lot of fun because there's certain occasions where, not very many, but there are certain occasions where an IPA isn't what you want to drink. And so to have the option to have a good, nice, refreshing lager, I like that.
Will you be doing any kind of souring here?
Potentially.
Okay.
Yeah, potentially. We got to get everything set up first, because there's the risk of doing sours, but we will have some that are, if you want to think about a traditional full sour program, that's a ways off, but we'll have some other ways to get some sours out. Yeah, for sure.
So barreling will be a very large part of what's done here.
Correct.
I mean, I guess it's right in the name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct. We have, being part of Diageo, we have access to a lot of barrels, which is fun. So we have a lot of different spirits that we can put beer into. We know if you think about bourbon is the easiest one for us to get because you can only use bourbon barrels once for bourbon. Yeah. But, here on site, we have where we're aging a lot of rum. So we do have some rum barrels that we could play with if we wanted to. And then the Johnny Walker and other Scotch whiskey brands are huge across the pond. If we could get our hands on some of those, we could make some amazing beers.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you for spending some of your precious time with me. I know you're extremely busy.
You're welcome.
And thank you everyone for watching and listening.
The Uncapped Podcast is produced by Graham Cullen and me, Chris Sands. Be sure to like us on Facebook, and if you've enjoyed these podcasts, please leave us a review on Google Play or the iTunes Store. A special thanks to Double Motorcycle for providing our theme music. Thanks for listening.